Welcome to Encounter, where we celebrate putting faith into action and community leaders who live out compassion, grace, and love. We're a program of the Broome County Council of Churches that addresses food insecurity through CHOW and the Greater Good Grocery, provides hospital and jail ministry, builds wheelchair ramps, and assists neighbors with transportation and shopping services through Faith in Action volunteers. We invite you to the conversation. Encounter your neighbors as we learn to walk together in love and kindness.
Good morning and welcome to Encounter. I'm your host today, Joe Sellepack. I'm the Executive Director at the Council of Churches. When I get to talk about the Council of Churches, oftentimes I will refer to us as a Matthew 25 organization. In Matthew 25, Jesus is trying to separate the sheep from the goats, and the question is, what did you do for those who are hungry? What did you do for those who are thirsty? What did you do for those who are naked? What do you do for those who are in prison? What do you do for those who are sick? And oftentimes, we within the church, we often forget the fact that the ministry of the church is really centered around that ministry to those folks who are marginalized, those people who are either through what is occurring to them within their own personal life or what they experience within society itself is marginalizing them. It is making it them. And then Jesus, in that section of Scripture, he identifies himself with those folks, and he says, "Whatever you do to the least of these, you've done to me." And oftentimes we in the church need to hear that story over and over again about where Jesus is and how we can begin to find him in those who are considered to be the least, the lost, the broken, and those who are in prison. In order to help us do that, every now and then we run into these movements. And one of them is the Poor People's Campaign, which is headed by William Barber, as well as
Reverend Liz Theoharis.
Liz Theoharis, and she is the Presbyterian minister. And today I have a Presbyterian minister with me today. Kimberly Chastain is the pastor at United Presbyterian Church down on Shenango Street in the middle of Binghamton. So right. Welcome to Encounter today, Kimberly.
Thank you.
So Reverend Dr. Theoharis, we're remembering her. We're talking about her today because she has recently co-written a book.
Yes.
Do you want to talk to us a little bit about what that book is and what it's about?
It's she co-wrote it with a co-worker of hers called Noam Sandweiss-Back. It's called "You Only Get What You're Organized to Take," and it is, let's see if I can put it up on the screen, Lessons from the Movement to End Poverty. Reverend Theoharis was with Dr. William Barber when they launched the Poor People's Campaign in 2018. The New York State launch was at Binghamton United, and so when she was getting ready to launch the book, she asked if we would be interested in sort of closing the circle, because we had a great turnout then and a great conversation then. It's a really interesting book because it's Dr. Theoharis talking about her 30 years of engagement with organizing in the communities of people who are left out of our political and economic system.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, you read it and you feel like it's almost another Groundhog Day experience.
Right.
And on the other hand, you can see the places where light breaks through and things start to happen differently. And I think, although it was written and contracted for before the present election, I think it has a lot to say to people who are feeling really kind of panicked because they don't know what's happening in the turmoil we've got going right now.
Yeah. So organizing is an interesting word, because oftentimes, like I remember when people were talking about Saul Alinsky. This was back in when Obama was president, and people were claiming that Saul Alinsky, who wrote the book Rules for Radicals, this goes going way back now.
Man, we're talking college for me.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I gave that book to somebody, and I said, because they were a younger person, they were getting into organizing, and I said, if you haven't heard of Saul Alinsky, you should. And the thing is that, when they were talking about him, they often talked about him as being communistic or other kinds of things like that, which couldn't be further from the truth if you actually knew who Saul Alinsky was and what the Rules for Radicals was really all about. So how did you get let's just make it autobiographical, Kimberly. How did you get exposed to organizing within congregations and that kind of thing?
Well, I was in seminary in Pittsburgh when steel and coal were going under. Mm-hmm. That dates me a little bit. But I was watching as these communities that had their whole lives shaped by those industries were having to find new alternatives, and often the only meeting place and the only organizing space in those communities was the churches. And so I kind of feel, again, like I've come full circle at Binghamton United, because we have this fantastic space that we offer to the community, and it's the same kind of approach of saying, come on, let's talk about these things that matter. We've got a space here to use for that purpose. And, if you don't start with the assumption that the problem lies in the individual, if you start with the assumption that the problem is bigger than any one person, then you're able to look beyond personal transformation as a way to solve problems. And I also have a degree in social work, so I have experience with working with people in therapeutic settings as well. It isn't that I don't believe in therapy, it's that I believe that there are some problems that come from the way we've created a system that we can't function in.
That's true. So family systems theory, one of the folks that I really liked was a guy named Bowman. Mm-hmm. And Bowman would even talk about folks who have schizophrenia or other types of diseases or mental conditions that where it was indicative of not just of the individual, but of the system that the person was a part of. And that oftentimes you need to remember that the person who's the identified patient isn't necessarily the one who's really sick, right?
Well, and we see that every day at Binghamton United, because we do have the Up Center, which houses people who are unhoused, and we do have a pantry and a community meal where people come to try to connect around whatever needs they have. And over and over again, you see people who have severe mental illness but don't have anyone who will monitor their medications. So it's nobody's fault. It's the way the system was built. You have people who can't apply for jobs because they don't have access to computers. Nobody's fault. It's more efficient to have the job applications online. The poverty is something that may or may not create the conditions, but it certainly does not allow for escape from them without something being rearranged.
And that's the point that Dr. Theoharis is trying to make in this book, is that you need to organize in order to take that, right?
Yes, and she wants to go further than just demonstrating in the street. I think it's 3 levels. She talks about resistance, which is the organizing, the speaking up. There's restoration, trying to create new possibilities, and then there's reorganization, which is not insisting on changing taking a community and asking how can we do it differently in this community so that it's sustainable, it's not dependent on outside forces changing their policies.
Right.
And you have to have all three because the winds of change are all around us, and in a system where the popular election determines who's making the policy choices.
Right.
You have to have some stability at the ground level. And the chaos that people experience in poverty doesn't begin in them, but unless there's some stability in place, it's very difficult for people to get out of poverty. And you have to, it's easier to do that for a community through mutual aid and through building each other up through connective networks than it is to ask one person at a time to pull themselves out.
Right. But there seems to be like within that the juxtaposition would be that you need to empower people to pull themselves up, and that is like the role of the issue that us sometimes people like me get into, is that I want to be the savior of the world, and realizing, of course, that we can't do that for everyone, right?
Well, and when you say empower people to pull themselves up, as long as that language is framed in terms of individualism, you've got a problem.
Right.
You know, it's funny that you talked about the Matthew 25 judgment.
Right.
Because there was a point at which the Poor People's Campaign had an advocacy day about hunger in the Congress, and one of the Congress people said to them, well, it doesn't say in the Bible that Jesus wanted Caesar to feed the poor. That's something that's supposed to happen to the church. And Dr. Barber said, well, it's interesting, first of all, that you identify with Caesar. But second, Luke specifically has Jesus saying, when the nations are gathered. So it is in fact talking about nations doing what is needed to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit those in prison, heal the sick. And by turning it into something that's focused on white saviors, focused on individuals doing heroic stuff and doing things one at a time, we miss the fact that there is plenty of conversation about God's judgment being on groups and nations for failing to be faithful.
Yeah. You know, it's one of my favorite. I think it's in the Psalms where it's talking about we were wandering in the desert. We were looking for an inhabited town, and as soon as they find an inhabited town, they get shelter, they get food, and they get help. The inhabited town is important because it tells us that society, at least within that pericope, would be responsible for offering those things in order for people to be safe, secure, and functional as human beings, right? Yeah. So my guest today is Kimberly Chastain, and we're talking about an event that's actually happening at her congregation. It'll be the launch of this book that a friend of hers, actually, Dr. Theoharis, was involved in writing, and she will be there at the launch.
Yes.
And she'll be speaking on the book itself.
Yes, April 25th. Doors are opening at 6, and we expect it to go till 7:30 or 8. We hope to have a good conversation with as many people as are interested in shaping things differently and doing something that will lift the whole community as we can involve. And so that's one of the reasons that they called, is that we have we have a really broad range of people attempting to do good in our community.
Right.
And the hard part always seems to be getting everybody in one place to talk about what they're doing together. And so every once in a while, it's good to have a cause that you can come and discuss. And yeah, and I think this book offers some exciting possibilities and some wonderful stories. You know, they've been doing this work, again, for 50 years, 30 years for Liz. And to see it, what she's learned and how things have unfolded in different communities is a great basis for conversation for how things are unfolding in our community.
Now, the Poor People's Campaign itself, as you're talking, is 50 years old. It's
yes.
Old. And can we like flesh out how it evolved and where it started?
It was one of the brainchildren of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and it was launched in 1968. And the goal was to reach across all of the different lines of identity that we set up in this country and say, we all want the basics for our children. We all want the right to live and live in peace. How can we come together and do that? And it happened that 1968 and 1969 were exceedingly violent years, and kind of brought the original impetus to an ending. And so when Dr. Theoharis and Dr. Barber were starting this process of organizing nationally, they were very informed by Dr. King's nonviolence and his broad approach to getting people to talk about common issues. And so they decided to relaunch it as the heir of the Poor People's Campaign.
Yeah.
And 40 states signed on, and we've had, you know, it's been a very active organizing presence in various communities. But it's like anything else, you know, it needs to be refreshed, re-examined, retooled,
and fed
every few years.
Yeah, we all need food, right? So, yeah, it's so interesting to me, you know, that it you know, that all of this stuff emerges from the church in a lot of ways. You know, even the civil rights movement. If you took away the congregations that kind of fueled the civil rights movement, you pretty much don't have anything left, right? Because the congregations were so active in that. What is it about our faith as Christians that lends itself toward this type of calling?
Well, Christianity obviously is deeply rooted in Judaism, which has a strong social justice message and a strong connection to the idea that God cares for the people that nobody else is looking at. And
right.
The Bible, from beginning to end, is full of references to you know, not plowing the corners of your fields so that the poor can go and glean.
Yeah.
And giving a certain amount to the poor so that they have a subsistence level. It's trickier now because we're in a post-industrial age, and everybody doesn't start with the same stuff.
Right, right.
But the principle is the same, that if there's somebody who can't make it, the society, the collective, has a responsibility to do something with that. And in the letters of Paul, he's remembering the poor in Jerusalem. There had been a famine, and he was collecting an offering everywhere he went to support those folks back in Jerusalem.
Right.
Jesus, one of the principal parts of his ministry was feeding people.
Right, right.
And that's something that it's easy to get away from or to feel helpless in the face of. But the truth is, there's nothing simpler than offering somebody a bite to eat, a cup of coffee, and it creates a common bond in humanity. I have very close friends who are from the Punjab in India, and you can't go to their house without eating something.
Right.
You walk in, they're looking around for what they can give you. And we've gotten so far away from entertaining in our houses that it's hard to remember that that was a tradition in American culture even 50 years ago.
Yeah, that is true. My when you were talking about the scriptures and about Jesus and the offering that Paul took up, I was reminded of that story of the widow's mite, where and oftentimes we preachers like to take that and use it for Stewardship Sunday or any number of other things, but in reality that whole story is an indictment on the church or on the congregation or the temple, because that woman gave everything that she had to this temple, and there was people that were giving lavishly and all the rest of it that kind of showed that were there, and that they were the people who were being focused on. But she had to give everything that she had, and Jesus said, look, this temple isn't worth that much. It seems to me as if we dance around sometimes that issue in congregations as well. Who gets to have a voice, and what stories do we remember? Is it the people who have all the money, or the woman who gave everything that she had? And how do we do that?
Well, who tells the stories and who hears the stories are always complicated. I've had a real conversion experience at Binghamton United because we're diagonally across from the bus station. We are, as you mentioned earlier, right downtown. We have people coming into our lobby every day looking for help and looking for hope and looking for other possibilities. And you start out, like you said, with kind of a savior complex, thinking you're going to do such good for these folks. It didn't take me very long to realize that there is a resilience and a creativity and an insistence on being heard that you and I probably don't have.
Right.
And we're so used to being at the center of every conversation that we sometimes lose sight of the fact that we can learn from the folks that we're trying to help.
Right.
If only we will sit back and listen instead of telling people what we think they need.
And imposing our own judgments on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. My guest today is Kimberly Chastain, and we've been talking about the book, You Only Get What You Organized to Take, and a launch that is happening in April 25th at 6 o'clock at United Presbyterian Church downtown in Shenango. Folks can find out more about that by going on the website, I'm sure, of United Presbyterian Church. And you can also find out more about it just by emailing, and we can send you out the announcement. So
yes.
You want to give folks your email, an email address that they could...
Well, the fastest way would probably be to email at media@upcbgm.org. You can also email me directly at pastor@upcbgm.org. Somebody thought the airport code was going to be self-explanatory when they set it up. I don't know. And yeah, we're excited about the possibilities. We're excited about the conversation, and we hope that we get a lot of people coming to tell and hear and envision new possibilities for ways we can approach the problems that are everywhere. But I'm going to riff again, Joe. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I was so impressed when I came to Binghamton that it has everything a city has, but smaller.
Right.
So the university and the opera and the hockey team and the
Right.
baseball team and the symphony and the poverty
Yeah.
and the unhoused population and the employment issues. And you don't see it most of the time because it's a pretty cool place with a lot of cool stuff going on. But you don't have to look too hard if you have an open mind and an open heart to see the real need and the possibilities for addressing things if we're only willing to talk and listen to each other and to work together, even when we don't agree on everything. We can agree on what needs to be for people to have quality of life.
Exactly. And one of the things that I was curious about, and in our last 2 minutes, how would you appropriate the Easter message in order to bring this home to folks, because we are entering into the season of Easter?
Well, I have one of those commemorative plates that were really popular in the 50s and 60s that has a picture of the women at the empty tomb, and it says, "He is not here, he is risen." And it was on the wall of a church that I served in New Jersey. And I always thought it was really funny to be saying to people, well, why are you here? But the truth is, if we're looking for where Jesus is in the 21st century, it is with the people he loves.
Right.
Not necessarily in the church building.
Right.
And so the resurrection, I always say, it isn't, did the resurrection happen, but does the resurrection happen? Can people see the possibilities for new life and for transformation? And what are we as Christians doing to make sure that those possibilities are visible and accessible to the people who need them most?
And we often will find ourselves in positions where we think that no one can change. But the truth of the resurrection is that they can. That possibility is always out there, right?
And it's not just individuals that can change. Institutions can be changed. Nations can be changed. The world can look different than it does right now.
And we all can be changed too.
That's right.
And by we all changing, we can allow for the possibility that folks themselves can be transformed as well.
Another great text I think of in my old age, "We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed."
We shall be changed. This is awesome.
Yes.
Kimberly, thank you for being on Encounter today. It's been a pleasure reconnecting with you, and to remind everyone that April 25th, we are having a book launch at 6 o'clock at United Presbyterian Church.
42 Shenango.
42 Shenango Street. And for all of you, I pray that you would be kind and generous to each other and remember to serve those who Christ loves.